Yeah.
Okay, John. We're good to go.
Ready to go? All right. All right, why don't we get started? This is a meeting, a special meeting, the Village of Sherwood Hills Board of Trustees. Today is Wednesday, January 7th. It is 4:01 p.m. We're calling the meeting to order. Chrissy, can you do the roll call?
John Ives,
Present.
Carol Barford,
Here.
Dietmar Basile,
Present.
Bob Fulk,
Present.
Mark Letter,
Here.
Shabnam Lutfi,
Here.
Kate Olsbeck. Here.
Okay, item 3, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Dietmar,
Yep, I'll make that motion to approve the agenda as presented.
is there a second? Thank you, Bob. Further discussion, ready to vote? All those in favor of?
I have a discussion.
Yeah.
I have just a question for Carol and Dietmar. So the discussion of open records. I just wanted to see, was it one of you that put that on this agenda? And it seems related, but a little off topic for the agenda item number 7 tonight. So I just was wondering why that was on the special meeting agenda versus at a normal board meeting.
Yeah, and Carol, I don't mean to speak for you. I think you can add to, why don't I just go first here? So yes, Carol and I decided to put that on the meeting agenda for today's special meeting, just to start the conversation and to give an opportunity to present information that's been put together to date. I don't think that in the general terms of today's discussion is really, this is not a once and done, but it's really getting the ball thrown up in the air and starting to hit it, so.
Okay. I just asked because I do think that is a topic many residents would want to either give feedback on, be engaged with, and this is a more difficult time, I think, for people to, make versus a normal board meeting. So if the intention is just to kick it off, I'm okay keeping it on. If we were really going to decide some kind of new process, I do think that that's the kind of thing we should have at a normally scheduled board meeting, so.
Yeah, again, Carol, feel free to chime in. That wasn't my intention, certainly not ours. I'm going to say that. It's truly to get things kicked off and talked about.
Yes, absolutely. Just to get the process started.
Okay, thanks for raising that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, item,
Got to vote on it?
we do have to vote. Yeah, ready to vote now? All those in favor, please say aye, or raise your hand. That motion carries. Statement of public notice. Chrissy, Brian, I just want to confirm that the meeting was properly noticed.
So let's.
Okay. Procedures orientation, just want to remind folks that this meeting is also being broadcast on the village's Facebook page. Any comments, questions won't be responded to contemporaneously by the board, but any comments or questions should be sent to our village administrator, Brian Mooney. Public comments, item 6. This is an opportunity for community members to speak to the board. No discussion or action may take place at this time. So trustees may ask clarifying questions only. Speakers may be limited to 3 minutes. We're going to limit public comments to 4 minutes. And once we get to about 3.5 minutes, I'll raise my hand and folks can finish up. Written comments can also be submitted to Brian Mooney as well as written comments. I had a quick statement here before we begin public comment. I wanted to set a brief framework. The board welcomes public input and takes resident concerns seriously. When the same topic has been raised multiple times, our role is to ensure comments are heard, clarified where appropriate, and then addressed through proper procedures, rather than repeated debate. So this helps keep our meetings productive, fair, and respectful for everyone. And then I'll ask if there's any public comments. Gloria.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gloria Beach. I can't tell really how people can see me or not. So thank you, Kate Olswick, for raising the topic that I wanted to start off with. Today's agenda items. So today's agenda items, we have two agenda items that are for discussion only. Item number 6 and item number 7 and item number 8. We cannot take action. We can't actually have a vote on either of those items. We can't also discuss much of what's in today's meeting package, such as roles of village trustees, relationships between trustees, administrators, and other staff, conflicts of interest policy, because it wasn't properly noticed and it's not on today's agenda. I want to point out an email that I wrote that is also included in today's agenda. If anyone here wants to see it, it's right here. On December 28th, I wrote an email to Carol and Dietmar with the entire board on blind copy. The email is on page 24 and 25 of the meeting materials package. I objected to today's meeting for several reasons. One, I don't agree that the agenda only examines John Imes' role as president without also looking at the role of trustees as a body. This board is a body, and I think it's simplistic to just focus on John's role as president for group action that was, I'm losing my thought because I have to read. I hate reading. So without examining the entire board's part in this. 2 is special meetings drain finite resources as defined by time, money, and morale. We hear over and over about staff shortage, staff morale, tight budgets. Last fall, we lost a couple staff members. Brian Mooney shared with me and another resident one person's exit interview. That exit interview specifically noted special meetings as a burden imposed on staff. Special meetings add to the normal daily, weekly, monthly duties and responsibility of staff. Staff are already vocal about feeling overworked and undervalued. The regular duties of our staff don't just disappear when we have a special meeting scheduled. This meeting is in addition to what they already have to do. For example, today we have 1, 2, 3, 4 staff members here for this special meeting. And these people are not volunteers. We are paying for this. And we've been told by an exiting employee that special meetings are not great for morale. Earlier this week, I learned that the village attorney, Mr. Cole over here, has been consulted in preparation for today's meeting. He has agreed to be here today for 2 hours, at which point he has to leave for another meeting. He is not pro bono. We are paying for this. Generally, special meetings are less well attended by the public because they're at odd times. This is Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Their last special meeting was Saturday morning at 8:30. These meetings are poorly attended because they're at odd times and our communication for the village we just lack a robust channel to communicate out to people. It leaves residents feeling out of the loop. The recommendation I made to Carol and Dietmar, and instead of this special meeting, was to address the issues it seemed they hoped to address using our normal committee structure. And I suggested that without delay, preferably at the January 20th meeting, a new committee be established to address good governance, accountability, and ethics issues that could help this board function without question in the interest of the village. My final comment is regarding the open records request discussion today. When the board discusses open records requests, I want to note, I find it really curious and worth noting that not included in the open records examples are any request for a profit and loss statement pertaining to the due diligence process for the Logic acquisition. The existence and relevance of a profit and loss statement has been raised multiple times during public comments, and without doubt, it has been subject of more than one open records request. The existence of a profit and loss statement has been refuted and denied during board open sessions, as well as to the media several times, namely the Isthmus and the Cap Times. The email proving that, yes, in fact, John Imes and Brian Mooney were both provided a profit and loss statement as early as September 2nd, and then again on September 3rd, is included on page 63 and page 61, respectively, of the December 16th board agenda item number 9, supplemental materials. Also on page 61, that email is shown to have been provided to Chrissy Cull on November 12th. That 79-page document was generated as a result of Shabnam Lotfi going to the village hall on November 25th, looking for a document, the profit and loss statement, that does not exist. Why has the board still failed to publicly disclose, publicly acknowledge, and publicly correct the record that, yes, on September 2nd, an email was sent to John Imes personal email with Brian Monet on copy that did in fact contain a link to the profit and loss statement, and that this information was not provided to all members of the board. Thank you.
Can I just say something? Gloria, can we get a copy of what you read? You made a lot of citations to certain pages. If you could email that, that would be great.
I will.
Thanks.
Other public comment? Sam?
Sam Mahaney Braithwaite, I'm not gonna stand up again. Okay, just to start with, I want to make sure that you all know that John does not belong as the president of this board. He was a cheerleader. We don't want a cheerleader for a board president. So, but at the same time, we do need to recognize that the other board members went along with his cheerleading without putting any brakes on it. So, like I say, John, yes, you are responsible for leading us down this path, but the other board members should have raised their hands and put a brake on. Now, let's see here. Recommend the residence committee governance, a committee, residence government committee, which I can't pronounce, but just as Gloria was saying, that's what should happen here, not this. This should be a committee that goes over all of these things very carefully and determines what is appropriate to our village, what is not. And I was reading some of the stuff that was in there that was not, there was discussion there about arresting people and putting them in jail, which I wondered where a jail was, which I know is a holding room, but never mind. Okay, the board seems to be focused on staff retention. For the last 4 years, everything has been driven by, let's keep our staff retained. And how do we do that? We give them a new building, we give them new things, et cetera, et cetera. I'm tired. What about resident retention? It's time that we now start thinking about what is it that residents need. Oh, how can it got better? Okay, the other thing is that we cannot consolidate all of our power as we have in the past with the board president. As I wrote in my email that I sent to all of you, when power is consolidated down to the board and most importantly, the president and the administrator, you guys are working in an echo chamber and you are not hearing what the community is saying. In point, Blue Lagoon or whatever that thing is that we now belong to. That should not be you. It should not be Brian. It should be that you go to the community and you say, we now have a membership in this organization. Is there somebody who would like to now serve on this committee? Would you please use the resources that are in this village? Next, let's see here. Okay. I think that the governance committee needs to come up with the way that we're going to put to rest this whole thing about records request, because we need to just get that out of the way. I really would like an apology from John for what he took us through with that building and the continual drumbeat that could not let go of the questions or the input that was coming from the village. There were people in here who were saying that guy that came and did the assessment of the building, I looked at it. It was child's play. It would never have been accepted. And you didn't seem to care. This was, again, a professional in the village, and you just didn't listen to what they're saying. You also didn't even take the profit and loss that Kate worked up. It never even showed up on the website. And it was in the end, that was what she had done, was actually pretty darn close to what that profit and loss statement ultimately said. Do not try to tell me that it was the administration's point and responsibility to get that profit and loss statement to us. You, as the president, and being asked, you needed to get that for us and give it to us as we continually asked. Okay, well, let's see, proposed language for how people and trustees are assigned to committees. I've already talked about that. Let's be careful we're not in an echo chamber. And, okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Sam. I also responded to your email this
I
afternoon.
saw it already.
And-
And I
and copied the
argue it
board.
with you.
Are there other public comments this evening or this afternoon? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I assume people can hear online. My name is Peter Hans. I live at 2909 Columbia Road. I was a trustee for 8 years, president for 6 years. Thank you so much for scheduling this meeting. This is really long overdue, but this is a good start to 2026. I urge you to create an ad hoc committee as soon as possible, next board meeting, to look at governance and again, the open records, with the idea that you would create a standing committee after the spring election. And then you could decide who then would sit on that kind of committee for a term of 2 years or whatever it might be. There should be rotation. You can decide how you want to create that committee. But I urge you not to wait until sometime later in the spring. You need to do something in January. Create an ad hoc committee. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Peter, other public comments this afternoon? Yeah, Fred.
Hi, Fred Wade, 1121 Wellesley. I just wanted to make one point. Recent board meeting, you had a 77-page board packet for a closed session. And left hanging the question, what are you going to do? I read half of the board packet yesterday. And my recommendation is you don't take that any further. It's a waste of your time. You're never going to figure out the relative merits of what happened that day. And it never should have happened in the first place. It happened because a trustee was trying to do her job to get a document she should have had a month ago. The entire board should have had it. That profit and loss statement. And it's incredible to me as I read through what was in that board packet. You had to get halfway through those documents before you got Shabnam's statement and the reason that she was there in the first place. To get that document that should have been provided to the board as soon as it came in. And it was incredible to me that no one in the staff, nor Shabnam, had been provided with the name of the document that it was in, so it could be asked for, found. It was incredible to me that there was not a due diligence file in the village hall, that the staff knew where every document was considered due diligence had been consolidated and was available. I mean, the dysfunction is just mind-boggling. And and then this decision to take that incident and present it to the board in closed session as if the trustee was entirely responsible for what happened is incredibly mind-boggling. I mean, it's the dysfunction of the board and the leadership that we have had over the past few months and longer that got us to this point in the first place. And you've got more important things to accomplish, particularly with respect to what we're going to do with the facilities needs that we have in this village. And to make judgments about that and to go down another rabbit hole, it's not going to accomplish anything. And the board is ultimately responsible for it because it was so dysfunctional. You've created such a dysfunctional situation.
Thanks, Fred. Are there other public comments this afternoon? Other public comments? Craig says, thank you. Craig.
Yeah, hi, thank you. About the open records discussion, I work in the IT industry, and so I've sort of taken a little bit of a look at this, and I see a lot of predatory IT services who provide ways of managing open records requests. I know it's onerous for government. It's very expensive. We look at these requests, we look at how complex they are when you get into it. And you think about where all these messages and documents are and who are we going to pay to retrieve them and so forth. In a village like ours that's small, where I'd say the majority of documents are open and transparent and should be, and there's very few documents, personnel, maybe negotiations and so on. There are very few documents that are actually confidential or not subject to open records requests. I think in that case, things are flipped and we have to be careful with IT solutions. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be around for the leader discussion to hear it, but I'll watch it afterwards. And I know there's no action being taken, but please let's not sign large IT contracts without outside providers to spend lots of money for this. I think we can probably come up with a more sensible, cost-effective solution where the default is to make communications transparent. A simple example would be all emails through shorewoodhills.com or .gov, after 2 weeks get put into an archive that anybody could search and look through, for example. Something as simple as that so that people can do their own self-service requests instead of having to burden the staff. So anyway, I hope I can be involved in those discussions going forward, but I think there are some ways to handle open records requests more sensibly. There will still be some that do need to come through the proper channel, like all these ones that you've been seeing. But I think the lion's share of what people are looking for do not need to come that way. There are other ways to satisfy those requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Other public comments? Marilyn?
Marilyn Townsend, 1121 Wellesley Road. Thank you for the opportunity. I came here a few minutes late, so I see we have 4 trustees in person, 2 on Zoom.
3. 3.
3. Oh, I'm sorry. Mark, I missed you. My apologies. I have tried to go through the open records request I made from the closed meeting last time. And each time I try to complete it, I just stop because it is truly energy draining to be at this point. But I would like to make a couple points. An elected official was told, based on the police chief's report, that there were many other open records requests, and the staff person needed to address those in part before getting to the profit and loss statement. Certainly one of those was my open records request, which I started in June of 2025 when this board went into closed session. I repeated it in July, August, and September. I was shocked that there were no due diligence reports generated in closed session. And as a lawyer who argues with opposing counsel about, am I getting all the records? I believed something was being hidden. How could my public officials vote to spend over $6 million for a building and I be given the only records which were basically generated by the sales agent? And they went ahead to authorize that? But then as I read the police chief's report, I see one of our staff people told an elected official she had to wait in line to all the other public records requests. No, that is not true. Even though I'm still waiting on a September record, I recognize as a resident in Shorewood Hills that our public officials get priority. And when they ask for a document, they get it. They don't wait for Marilyn Townsend's request from September of 2025 to be complied with first. The frustration that our elected official had to feel with that kind of response from staff. All I can say is if I'd been the public official, my voice would have gotten very loud. And that is not the way to run this community. When I began as a public official for 12 years, the administrator was solicitous to me, even though I was only one of 7, said, Marilyn, what do you need? I don't know where this board is going with their concern about a public official raising her voice to staff, but I'm going to watch that. And you can be assured that I will put everything in context. And I am very troubled. Number one. Lastly, we had 2 police officers at the last village meeting. As chair of personnel for 10 years, I constantly listened to the police say they didn't have enough staff. We had a referendum to get another staff person for the police department. I'm still befuddled why we allocated 2 police officers for the last meeting, 1 police officer tonight. I have no idea why the village of Shorewood Hills has nothing better to do for our police officers than to assign them to a 4 o'clock special meeting.
Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, other public comments this afternoon? Additional public comments? Okay, we will move forward with the agenda. Item 7, discussion of duties and prerogatives of the village president. Dietmar or Carol, did you want to speak to this? What would you do best?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have Carol lead the way on this one. And then I'll jump in as needed. And Carol, if you run into any technical issues, I'll supplement as needed as well.
Okay, thank you. As noted by Gloria and maybe some others before this meeting, it's difficult to look at the role of the president without looking at the trustees and also the administrator. So in the packet, everyone have seen that first materials that we included were the statutory descriptions of administrator, trustees, and president, not only Wisconsin statutes, but our ordinances, and trying to strip them all down to their essence to see how they overlap, how they align, and how the office of the president has become something that in practice is different from what is described in those documents. So just to start off the discussion, and that's, as Dietmar said earlier, that's all that any of these agenda items are, a start to the discussion. It seems to me that what we have is administrator, who's the personnel officer and delegates tasks to staff. And that's by reference to the position description of the administrator. That's how our ordinances work. Not much is defined in the ordinances. It's all by reference to the position description. And so the current one is in there. The trustees have all powers not assigned to another officer, but only by majority vote. No trustee individually has any power at all. And then there's the president. The president is a trustee who has the additional responsibilities of presiding at meetings and signing a bunch of things, signing ordinances, signing resolutions. And then in the statute, there's a bunch of other stuff that doesn't really pertain to Shorewood Hills, like being in charge of the jail and stuff like that, which we don't have. The president acts as one of the trustees. So I think what we need to decide, the question here in this first agenda item is, do we want to deviate from our recent practice, which is very common among municipalities, where the president conducts private discussions with outside entities, such as real estate developers? And if we want to change this practice, how should it change? Then the second part of agenda item 1 has to do with conflict of interest, a subject that's come up many times in recent meetings, and made a comparison in there between Wisconsin statutes, which governs the minimum requirements for dealing with conflict of interest. And I can enumerate those later in the discussion if we decide to. I also included in the packet UW-Madison's conflict of interest framework to see how one might look a little different than the Wisconsin statutes, because I think we need to kind of look around and see what the possibilities are. But again, there's a question here. What types of disclosures are relevant for the village? And how do we want to work on this? Do we want to work on it at board meetings? Do we want to have an ad hoc committee? And that has been suggested a couple different times. Whose work should this be to develop a conflict of interest policy? And the reason this conflict of interest is under the agenda item for the president is that conflict of interest considerations are going to bound the activities of president just like they bind everybody else. So those are my thoughts about agenda item number 1. And I'll cease and desist now and let others discuss.
And before others do, if I could just take the mic for a hot second, again, to address fellow trustees and those either here in the audience or those watching. Carol and I felt that it is most important to get these items discussed sooner than later. Some of you agree that this special meeting is warranted. Others don't agree that this special meeting is warranted. Either way, we feel like the process to follow is to lay this out in the open, to condense the information, and for the body, for the board to decide and discuss. And there are no decisions tonight. I just want to be very clear that this is getting the ball lobbed in the air and hitting it across the net and see what happens. So that's really the motivation behind all of this. As Carol had said, there's a large amount of information in this meeting packet. Her and I felt that it was most important to provide more information than less. So some people would argue, hey, why is X, Y, and Z included, or this example or that example? Again, it's to further the conversation, it's to further the discussion in all of this. So the only thing that I would like to add, and I guess sort of my view on this, John, I know we had it was not a technical vote of no confidence, but in a ways that's how I remember this in my head, where the entire body asked you to resign and you decided not to, which was your prerogative. I think you're elected by the voters. Only the voters get to decide what this may look like in the future and anything else. But I think it's so important, and what really has been illustrated here is, as Carol had mentioned, understanding what the prescribed duties are for any one of us, right? Whether it's trustee, president, administrator, et cetera. But more importantly, too, what are some of these privileges that the presumed presidency has come with? So whether they're assumed privileges, prescribed privileges because of legacy component, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's for this body to have this conversation and really understand how we want to frame this moving forward. So I wanted to add those comments and now yield the floor.
Additional comments, questions from trustees? Oh, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I guess I could just see the discussion a little bit. Going back to the example that I gave of president talking with real estate developers or contractors. Apparently this, in a private conversation, not necessarily with any other trustees, and being sort of the sole conduit of information back and forth with that other entity. I think one question is, should that be the way that it works? The president is not officially granted that authority. It's just that that's the way that it often works. Should we establish a different procedure? For example, should there always be two trustees? Is that information privileged? Is it, how should we be handling the president's role in interactions with outside entities?
Okay, reactions, questions? Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, I guess this is my biggest concern is that when the president or any board member is out speaking to anyone, are they speaking? I think it's easy because a lot of people, have their projects that they're enthusiastic about or they're behind. There are some, unfortunately, people that have been, I think, on boards and committees that are kind of single topic. I just want to work on my topic, and when that gets done, then, and that concerns me because I think then folks with coming from that direction aren't necessarily speaking for the, in the best interest of the whole community. Or in this case, the president can go talk to somebody and may or may not be speaking, may not be reflecting what the board thinks. And Carol and I did have this discussion about, talking to developers. I think it's not that we should have a board meeting to go out and talk to the people about different issues. But I think some of these types of meetings, it would be good to have another board member there just because people pick up on different things, and having a single person interpret conversations that can have a really big impact on the village. I would vote for, that there be more than one representative when we're talking to, especially like developers. I think if we're talking to the sewer district in Madison or, some other more minor conversation, but when we're talking about things that can really impact financially the village, there should be more than one person in the room, in my opinion.
Thanks for that, Bob. Other thoughts, comments?
It'll be a pretty quick meeting here.
Carol, go ahead. All right, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I think another consideration is whether this topic should be wrapped into the good governance commit. I think we're going to be considering whether or not we want to appoint an ad hoc committee on governance or ethics, and whether this is a topic that belongs in that sphere, how meetings are managed. And by the way, I'm assuming, you can tell me otherwise if not true, that most of the time the administrator is present at these meetings. So I think we need to have a good discussion grounded in the facts when we do finally get closer to taking action on this subtopic.
Thanks for that, Carol.
Yeah, if I can,
Go ahead.
sorry. I also agree with Bob that I think just having a couple of different points of view will create a more accurate recollection and representation of discussions that take place. So I would be in favor of having more than one trustee at meetings and having it rotate, because there's none of us have special dispensation to push the agenda. We all need to take part, and I think that is hand in hand with some of the comments made about the board needing to take responsibility here. I feel that myself in 2020 hindsight, that I could have done a better job keeping an eye on the logic on the logic process. So this would be one way to do that in future.
Thanks, Carol. Shabna?
I have some thoughts, but before, I really actually wanted to hear from the administrator. Do you have any thoughts on how things are working, what your relationship with the president is versus board? I would like, if you have any thoughts, I'd like to hear them.
Related to this topic,
Yeah.
as far as meetings go, I can say from past experience in the other municipalities that I've worked in, this is traditionally how this relationship is handled. When an individual or someone would come or have an interest in some type of a project, or just spitballing ideas or thinking about and talking about things that might align with things that the village has in mind for certain like University Avenue corridor plan, they traditionally would reach out to Village Hall, and then subsequently the village administrator, it would, at least how I was trained, would notify the village president and try to schedule a meeting. And then if things were to a point where they wanted to have like a concept review or something of that, that would be brought forward to either staff meeting or a plan commission meeting for greater discussion. But that the way this has traditionally been handled, and I'm not saying this is right or it's wrong, that's just the way it was handled in the prior communities I worked in. Set up a time to get with the village president and set up a meeting time to start talking about it, see where things are at, and then take it to the next step, whether that be a committee, a staff meeting. Some things were set up a little differently in other communities, but and then have concept plans be brought up, have department heads weigh in on what they thought considerations might be that they need to think about with regard to their plan, timelines, things of that nature, just to get the general conversation started.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. I guess I will share some raw thoughts. I appreciate the statutory citations, and I also start there. There doesn't seem to be a significant difference between trustees versus the role of the president. The role of the president is somewhat clerical in nature, in the sense that they preside over meetings, sign documents. Yes, there's some nominations to committees, but those nominations go nowhere without the board. The president doesn't have a cabinet, they don't have a team. So the president's authority is equal, I think, to the other trustees. It's also necessary to mention that this is a nonpartisan board. There's no DNC, there's no RNC, there are no teams. And I think that that provides for such a beautiful opportunity to have a form of government that is like impossible to have at the state level or the federal level. That you could have meetings where every trustee has access to the same information and can debate issues based on the merits, which is like what you want. It's what we all dream about, that we could have people make decisions based on data. Each trustee runs a campaign, they complete nomination papers, they go door to door, they introduce themselves to residents, earn their trust, and only the top 3 on a ballot get to sit at this table. And I think that every trustee, to do their job, must have access to equal information. And maybe the easiest way to do it is to have a central database. I can only mostly analogize to my day job, where we have a central database. Every client's case is in there, every notice is in there, every decision and something that we work at is in there, because your legal assistant, your paralegal, the attorney on the case, the junior attorney, everybody's got to have access to it. And everybody knows their role and responsibility is that if you got something through email, you would upload it to that client's file. And I think that if we had a central database, we wouldn't be searching emails, and there wouldn't be inadequate or access to information or even questions about it, because everybody could get it. Yeah, I think that's a start. And I think the other issue we have is every trustee should be emailing from their village inbox. It just shouldn't even be a question. To email from a private email inbox and copy yourself is wrong. It should stop today, like right now. And I believe that all the open records requests that were searched, not knowing that the search request required you to state that you want emails where the trustees are copying themselves, they're done incompletely. They're not, I believe when we get to that point, all of those need to be redone, because the searches don't come up if you're not emailing from your village inbox. I support an idea of a ad hoc governance committee, because the issues that this board is experiencing are so much deeper than one P&L. It is just so much longer in years of and I think that there's too many times where the board is passing an ordinance, like when they changed the composition of the waterfront committee and the pool committee by waiving all 3 readings of an ordinance in one sitting, when that's a violation of your own ordinances. And I could name too many examples of disagreements over the CIP and everybody saying it's statutory when it's not. That a trustee manual is needed, like really, really needed. I think we shoot from the hip at times, and it's just not how to govern. There's a lot of examples if you really want me to go through all of them. Let me go through some more notes. So I don't know. It's not like it's I don't know if their privileges are an issue when it's the communication style, it's the database that's missing. I think and I also, regarding who can talk to who, still think anybody should get to talk to anybody. You know, you want to talk to a consultant, talk to a consultant. You want to talk to Vanderwall, anybody can email anybody. It's when there's an email exchange of ideas and information that all of that information needs to be put on a shared drive. It's when you're going to start a conversation about a project that it should come to the board. I think gatekeeping is not a way to have democracy. I think it shows if you really have a true democracy. I could flesh that out a little bit more. You know, there's some other questions I have, like, Brian, when you put the agenda together, Do you need, does everybody get to have it? Like sometimes I'll email you, but then I don't know, does John have to approve it? I should be able to, or Kate or Dietmar or anybody else be like, here's my agenda item. But then it's like, well, let's see if John approves it. There are these little things that are occurring that I think nobody should have to worry about. You don't want resentment. We don't want people to have a narrative in their mind of preferential treatment or unfairness. You want accountability in ways that nobody gets to have a narrative in their story, a false narrative. And the way to do it is to have it transparent. It's time stamped. I submitted my request to Brian to have this on the agenda. Every other trustee can see it. It's time stamped, and personal preferences is removed from that process. We could do some other things, like maybe you don't want to have 20 things on an agenda. That's fine. The first 5 get submitted. Or each trustee could say, I need 6 minutes on this one. I want 20 minutes, so that, you know, there's other things we could do. 20-minute item. This is a 1-hour discussion, no more than 7 per night, something like that. I'm going to say one more thing. Actually, last comment. When it comes to open records, my belief is any resident, even if I don't like you, and I generally like everybody, could ask me for a document in my email and say, do you have the, you know, agenda from 2021? And I would search it and I would give it. I wouldn't hesitate for a second. That's what open records is. I would not tell the person, go get it else otherwise, or I don't have to. I have no interest in controlling information. That's the only way to have good discussion, is for more information. And if to win an idea by withholding information, your idea has to suck if it can't withstand scrutiny. So that's made my point.
Other reactions, comments, thoughts? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I'd like to return to the role of the president, in particular with respect to meeting with developers. The first thing I want to say is that we don't want to constrain the role of the administrator with respect to meeting with developers. I don't think that's necessarily the intention of the board or the expression of the board, but I just want to make clear that my perspective is there ought to be a free, unconstrained access to the village administrator for developers to discuss ideas and so on. So that conversation's going on, and I think that's fine. And I don't think the board necessarily needs to know about every conversation that goes on there. But once the administrator, or at a request of a developer, that this issue get elevated, right? That comes before the board. Then at that point, I think we have to have some rules in play. And the 2 issues that I'm concerned about is, first, notice, and second, participation. So with respect to notice, if a developer or the administrator says, hey, it's time for this issue to be brought to the board's attention, but they don't necessarily feel that it's appropriate at that particular time to convene a board meeting on the subject. They just want to know what a board member or some board members think about something. Well, it's the board's opinion that developer administrator is looking for, not a trustee or a president's view of it. And so I think at that point, there ought to be notice. That's, to me, something that triggers notice. And when I say notice, I don't mean notice just to the president that, hey, a developer called me up and he had an idea that I think is worth pursuing, and we ought to talk about it. Okay. That notice should go to the board. That is still all the trustees. And at that point, the trustees, I think, will sort of need to develop a mechanism or process to figure out who's going to attend that meeting. Okay, what participation is needed? What kind of expertise is needed? Is it finance? Is it plan commission? Is it whatever? Now, I don't necessarily want to convene a board meeting every time the administrator and the developer have something to talk about, because it just may not be a productive use of the board's time. It's an initial discussion. So it probably would be good to have a mechanism. Maybe it involves participation of the village president, but maybe it involves participation of other trustees. But I don't know that it necessarily requires the participation of the full board. But that's kind of something we need to figure out. What's the triggering event to elevate it to a board level discussion as opposed to just a discussion with a subset of the board? The critical thing to me, though, is just the communication piece. A, that the trustees, all the trustees, know this meeting is happening. And B, after the meeting has happened, that can be put on the agenda so that if only a small group of trustees attended, there would be a report at that point to the full board as to what went on. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. As I say, in my mind, I haven't quite figured out how do we figure out which trustees, how many trustees, whatever attends such a meeting. But I think the most important thing is just that people are aware of it, that the board is aware of it, and that there's follow-up with the board if only a subset of trustees attend the meeting. So that's the first thing. I want to switch to the topic of the president's role with respect to the agenda. So we have many more agenda items than we have time at any given meeting. So there's always going to be the issue of prioritizing items to be placed on a meeting agenda. But I thought we sort of solved that when we instituted a policy some time back that said any trustee could submit a request for a topic. And it was kind of my understanding that those topics would be placed on the agenda. And at the beginning of every meeting, the board votes on whether some topics are to be dropped, not because they aren't worthy of discussion, but simply as a matter of time management. So that's what I thought the procedure would be. I guess what's happened is in some cases, not all those items are actually listed on the agenda. They're down under future agenda items. Maybe the future agenda items should just be placed on the agenda and let the board at the beginning of every meeting sort out which of the items we're going to take up and which of the items we don't have time or high enough priority to take up at the given meeting, and we will postpone it, that topic or topics, to a subsequent meeting. It's perhaps a little time consuming to do that, but it probably is helpful from the perspective that each trustee knows that at least they got some airtime, that their request was not merely noted by the administrator or the village president, but was noted by the full board, and the board made a decision. So those are my initial thoughts on those subjects.
Thanks for that, Mark. Shadman?
Well, I have one thought, but since Mark just mentioned this, it would not be a violation of open meeting laws, and we have an attorney here who could correct me if I'm wrong. If, Kate wants to put an item on an agenda, and she emails Brian and copies the board. It's not a discussion. It's, I'm submitting my item. Nobody's responding. They're getting notice. Correct? Okay. Because then we would know it would be open if somebody submitted a request and it wasn't added and why it wasn't added, and you know, a lot of that could get taken care of. The other point I wanted to make was, and I bring this up because, how do I say this? Revisiting the past to learn from it is not a bad thing to do. So if we were to talk about logic or any other experiences we've had on the board, to say, if I could go back in time, what would I do differently? I'm curious to know what the other trustees would say. If you could go back in time, one thing I learned much later, maybe like within the last couple months, was that before the board even knew about the opportunity for logic, the entire staff or the department heads had visited the building, toured it, and had massive amount of information that trustees did not. They toured the building June 5th or 6th. I have it in an email. And the first closed session meeting wasn't until 2 weeks later. Would you do that again? I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm not trying to make anybody look bad. But the only way to learn is to revisit the past and say, you know, next time I would do this differently.
Other thoughts, comments? Carol, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, John. I just wanted to flesh out a little bit for residents watching about the agenda setting procedure, which, as Mark pointed out, as it's written now, it does not give any special prerogatives to the president. Any trustee can propose an agenda item by Tuesday of the week before a regular board meeting and submit the supporting material for the packet by that Tuesday. So as long as those two things happen, it should go on the agenda for approval or for being removed at the board meeting. So that's the way it's supposed to happen. And I dropped a packet. I can't remember the other thing I was going to say about it, but so just to know that the trustees are all supposed to be on an equal footing there. And the idea of sending it out as a notice, as Shabnam mentioned, I think would be a nice idea. Thanks.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm really struggling with the conversation because I feel like we are having a very productive brainstorm, but I feel like we are not really getting to the heart of the issue. And for me, the way that I think about this is, you know, when there's a governing body on paper, you know, it says we're all equal. In practice, I think what we're experiencing is that it's maybe not all equal. And companies aren't run by a board of CEOs, it's one CEO. And I think there has been an informal trust put into the presidency of the village that, you know, has allowed the president to take over certain roles and responsibilities when trust existed there and people felt maybe more comfortable. Bodies need leadership and they need someone to set a direction, set an agenda. I think it's very hard for 7 people pulling. Imagine you all have, you know, one of those kid balloon things and you're all pulling in different directions. We all might have a different vision. And so I think in practice, it's really hard to have 7 people governing equally. And so that's why informally, the president has taken on a larger leadership role. And my time, I'm not even over the 1 year mark on this board, but in the last 7 months, honestly, I have seen not a good demonstration of leadership, you know? That is why in November, I asked you to resign, John, because I do think that the village, to repair where we are right now, needs a change in leadership. And so if you look at the things that we are talking about right now, we're getting very myopic on tiny things. I'm not saying these are bad ideas. I actually think there are some great nuggets here. But there's a bigger picture here that it feels like two ships in the night in this conversation. If we look at the open records requests, you know, that is because of a loss of trust in leadership. If we look at these extra meetings that are being scheduled, that is because of a loss of trust in leadership. If we look at our long meetings going into midnight, 2 a.m., that is because of bad leadership. So I think we would have less of a problem with the agendas in front of us if we trusted our leader. And so I hear residents on, creating an ad hoc committee. That is one way to go. Unfortunately, in this situation, I also think we need to lean on our election process. And because, we're going to have 3 trustees, 3 trustees are up in the spring. I think one other way to look at this is we have to let the residents speak and vote in to this body who they want to actually lead them. I don't know. I was actually thinking, Shabnam, if I just look at this logic example, there's been many things tonight in the open records, in the open comment section, and what you just spoke to. I know that Brian had toured Logic before that closed session packet got to me in June. I know that. You admitted to it in the meeting, okay? And so that is a huge problem for me, because in that first June meeting, I spoke up against the purchase of Logic. I agree, Marilyn. We had the seller's brochure. We did not have enough information to make a almost $7 million purchase. This is why I voted against it and continue to vote against it. And, if I had to go back in time, I would have been stronger in my convictions then. That was month 3 for me on the board. So, I think that there were so many problems with how Logic went down, including the conversation around the P&L, that I frankly do not know where to start unwinding that. And where I get to is we need a change in leadership. And so I ask the residents, I ask the voters, I think that is how we have to change things here. We are at a crisis, I think, in how we are governing and the trust in this village. And I think that changes when we get new people into the mix. So.
Thank you, Claire. Other thoughts, reactions, comments?
This is Megan McKinney, 3401 by Burnham.
Megan, sorry, it's just the trustees talking now.
Oh, it's close to, okay, never mind.
Yeah, but if you want to
worries.
submit any comment or question, just send it directly to our administrator, Brian Mooney, and he'll share it with the board.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Shabnam.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything Kate said, but when you're restricted, the only thing we can do is come up with a list of things like everybody has to email from the village email, that database, make it a priority. Everything gets uploaded and downloaded from a certain location. What else? We could come up with, I came up with 2 or 3 right now, but we could come up with a bunch of more things like that, where what you can do in the meantime.
Dietmar?
I'm going to sort of summarize what I interpret folks have said thus far. And I guess just to go back to what we're talking about, which is the duties and privileges of the presidency as it conforms to not only this body, but the interaction with the administrator. And what I hear is that most of the folks that have spoken thus far, agree with as it's listed in the statutory requirements, the roles of the presidency are listed there, and that's it. Anything else are assumed privileges, whether they are privileges by legacy component, whether they're prescribed privileges from past, this is how we did it, this is how our other municipalities do it, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm asking, what Carol and I are asking you all, this body, is to define that. And this is the only thing that we believe to be meaningful and of meaning right now, or meaningful to discuss. How can we prescribe for not just John, but any presidency going forward, what the expectations are in terms of performance and interacting with the entire body? Common thread that I've heard is we're all equal. We all want to be equal trustees. You, those, Carol, Bob, Mark, we're all equal people, but we can only act with the majority of the body speaking on any given topic. Everything else, John, frankly, are privileges that need to be pulled back as far as the presidency is concerned. And that's what I want to get out of this body today. And again, there's no decision, but this is where Carol and I wanted to plant the seed and have the conversation. Yes, there are peripheral issues. Yes, there are things to unwind, but what's at the core of how do we want to act and interact with one another? So that's my motivation here today.
Thank you, Dietmar. Other thoughts, comments, reactions? Bob, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Just to follow up what Kate was saying, and I think what Dietmar's talking about, I'm wondering if we have a personality issue that we're trying to solve with a structural change, and I don't know that that's the case. As you say, Dietmar, this is not just about, well, I guess the question is this just about John, or is this about the presidency itself? Are we going to regain trust by making this structural change? And is it going to solve problems in the future? Everybody has a different personality. Going forward, there'll be different personalities that will be president. So how they approach things, are these ordinances or policies that we put in place, is that going to cure this? And I guess I don't have an answer. I just think we ought to reflect on that. Are we solving a more immediate problem, or are we solving a problem in our foundation that needs to be corrected so it's smoother going forward?
Okay, thanks for that, Bob. Mark?
Yeah, I think one thing, the message we do want to send is that the board is not empowering the president unless it does so explicitly. No trustee speaks for the board, not the president, not anyone, unless the board explicitly conveys that authority. And I think that's a message we want to kind of get out there so that, for instance, developers, we don't want them to get the wrong impression in speaking to a trustee or multiple trustees, that none of us speaks for the board and all the power resides with the board. Okay. And that's why I think it's important that when the developers want to have those conversations, the first place they need to go is to the village administrator and have that conversation. That's where, in my mind, we want to direct those conversations. And then if the village administrator says, hey, I think there's something here that the board ought to know about, the board should be aware of, then he should bring it to the board, not necessarily to an individual trustee. And then the board can decide. Is this a conversation we want to pursue? And if we do, how do we want to proceed? Do we want to proceed as a board, or do we want to proceed as a working group that is some subgroup of the board? But that's the way it seems it should go for me. It's not the president's role to kind of intervene in those conversations, to mediate those conversations. At the point that they reach the level in the administrator's judgment that this is something the board needs to know, then it should just come to the board. That's it. So it's that, again, it goes back to the comment I made earlier. First, there's a notice issue. What's the triggering event? The triggering event is the administrator saying this is something the board ought to be considering. And then the board will decide if it wants to have the conversation and how to have the conversation. So that's my view about that. And that doesn't relate to John or any particular president. That's just the way structurally it should be, because I don't think we want to legislate here for a given president. I would much prefer that we say this is a structure that works, whether we have full confidence in the president or we don't have confidence in the president. It won't matter, because the way we've structured it, we know that the board will be involved because the board will know what's going on. The board can make its own determination as to when and how to become involved. Okay, so that's my position on that. And with respect to the agendas, my feeling now, even though it's a bit unwieldy, is just put everything on the agenda. It makes for an agenda that might have 30 items. And somebody's going to have to sort out what the priorities are, because there's no way we're going to take on 30 items at a given meeting. But that's the responsibility of the board. I mean, it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because when we have agendas, we hate to single out agenda items and say, well, we don't want to talk about this one, we don't want to talk about that one. People's feelings might get hurt a little bit. Like, I feel the item I submitted to the board is something that's important to me, and I'm a little bit upset that the board has turned it down and kicked it to a future meeting. But hey, that's the way it is. That's life. So, and I think that's the only way to restore confidence, is to put everything on the agenda and let the board sort it out. I'm done.
Shabnam. Carol, you see your hand up, and then Shabnam.
Thank you, John. I would like to suggest, because I feel like we've been around the horn on this issue, and we do find some different opinions, some subtle and some quite different. I wondered if it would be all right to move on to the conflict of interest part of this agenda item, just to air out a few factoids to get people started thinking about it. Is that amenable?
We're still,
It's
we're
still
on
under
item-
the same agenda item.
So-
It's just focusing now on the conflict of interest part.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
It's one of the things. Do you want
I have something, but go ahead.
to? Okay.
Yeah, hold on, Carol, for a second.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah, I just want to be very clear with the board. So I think if we make these two adjustments, I just want to see if we are all agreeing on this. So number one, it's sounding like, so Brian, your process that you mentioned, like someone brought to your attention, a developer, whatever the issue is, that you would look at it. If you felt it was interesting or worthy of the board, you would go to the president. I think what we're saying is, no, you should email the entire board. So if there is a new thing that you think is worthy enough, instead of emailing just the president directly, it should instead go to all trustees. Is that a fair? It sounds like Mark was kind of echoing that. I don't know. Are we aligned? I'm seeing Dietmar shake. Yes. Does that work for you, Brian? So that is one organizational adjustment we have. And then it also sounds like it was suggested that if a trustee would like to put something on the agenda, they should blind carbon copy all other trustees in their email to Brian so that we are all informed what is getting stacked up for an agenda. Okay, I just want to, as we move on to the next thing, I think if we make those two adjustments, I think that that would benefit everyone.
Could I at least, if it's okay, Shabnam, my motivation to agreeing to the first part of the sharing of information and sort of the equality in privileges is I believe that this is a legacy privilege issue. It was always assumed to be, hey, I'm doing blah, blah, blah. I don't even want to root it into a developer in sort of any issue, confirming that the statutory duties as prescribed by the president, whether it's John, any other president, are just those. The rest of the power sits with the body. And for that reason, I'm saying, yes, it needs to go out to the rest of the body. That's my motivation. So I just want to make that clear to you, anybody else watching, etc.
Sure. To add, since we're like making headways, I just can't control myself. My mind is full of ideas and I'm getting really excited. I think that the way that we're looking at the role of the president in relation to the board is similar to the role of a chair with committees. It is not the chair of the committee that has the deciding all be all power. It is committee decisions. So we should do the same with the committees. It is the, I don't know, Recreation Committee's decision recommendation that comes here, or the Finance Committee's decision to pursue a path, I don't know, with a vendor that will come to the board or it'll go to Brian. That same process needs to be with the committees. And then, and speaking about that, like what, you know, if well, so what about like, if, let's just say John wants Bill here. I mean, this is the only example that I can think of. What does Brian do? When Brian gets a request from the president, what is he, I want to make sure that whatever we do, that the person is not cornered and Brian has is he supposed to say, no, John, I'm not going to do that? Is he supposed to say yes? If I ask, do you know what I'm saying? Like, Bill is here and Bill has repeatedly been here, not because the board decided. Is it Brian's decision?
For tonight, it was my decision.
Okay. Because there was an email chain, there was a little thread, and I got it from Bill, but then all the emails before it in that thread, I actually didn't get those emails. It said trustees only, and I didn't get the email from Brian that said trustees only yesterday or Monday at 11 o'clock a.m. I never got that email. And in that thread, John asks, should we add other things to the agenda? It's a very strange email thread. It's not clear.
I think I just forwarded the invite that Chrissy created. I might be wrong, but I think I just forwarded the invite, which kept everybody copied on. The trustees copied on the communication bill. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it was.
There's an email from you dated Monday, January 5th at 11:43 a.m. to Bill Cole and the trustees. And it copies 4 trustees, which I found very, very weird. Why copy 4 trustees if they're in the trustee only inbox? And I didn't get that email. But
I think I just forwarded the link. When I accepted the email, I just went into my calendar and just opened it and forwarded that because I don't know that I was off last week, so I didn't know if Bill actually received this. So that was why I reached out to him and invited him.
I don't want to get off on a tangent. I'm sorry if I did for a minute.
Was it Mark or Carol first? Mark, go ahead.
Start, just a quick comment. I think in terms of inviting outside persons, whether it's our counsel, whether it's financial advisors, whatever, I think with respect to attendance, those invitations come from the administrator. That's the administrator's job. Okay. If a trustee wants to request that someone attend a meeting, then they should make that request to the administrator, and the administrator will make a decision. And if the trustee doesn't like that decision, he can bring it to that, or she can bring it to the board. But I think the only way so it's not to me, it's not a presidential function. It's not a trustee function. It's an administrator function. And if the board or trustee is dissatisfied with the result, then the board can intervene.
Thank you, Mark. Carol.
Yeah, thank you, John. And thank you very much, Kate, for wrapping up that discussion with the two items. That was super helpful, and it seems like two things that we can do, which is awesome. But I would like to move us along to conflict of interest, just to kick this discussion off. We've noted several times that trustees are already bound by the provisions in the Wisconsin statutes. And if I and Gloria submitted quite a thorough summary of what's in the statutes, but if I can just paraphrase really quick, the things that trustees can't do or use their position for personal gain or gain of their immediate family. And there's a definition there that includes at least 50% financial support of immediate family for them to be that. Can't accept anything of value as a quid pro quo expectation. Can't use their vote in a quid pro quo fashion with some expectation. Can't vote on anything related to a financial interest that you have or an association that you have. And that's it. And it's all kind of implicit. There's not a lot of detail there. The statutes do provide that you can make more stringent ordinances regarding disclosures and conflict of interest requirements. And this is in Wisconsin statutes 19.44, and it gets pretty nitty gritty. You can require information about securities owned by elected officials, their creditors, their real estate holdings, some things about their income and some things about gifts. So that is where it can legally go. The question is, what is relevant for us here in the village? And what kind of disclosures like this are useful and would be a useful part of the whole ecosystem of getting people to participate. So then, by comparison, we included in the packet the UW's framework for university officials, people who have responsibilities and capacity to commit resources of the university. So I think it's analogous to a trustee, although university officials, some of them don't have to act in a group, they can act on their own. So that's a little bit different. But what do we have to disclose there? Any remuneration or equity interest? Anything about intellectual property that might be related to your university responsibilities? Anything about service with fiduciary responsibilities that might be related to your university responsibilities. So either the board or another group is going to have to wade through and try to figure out what is going to restore trust in terms of conflict of interest disclosures, if anything, and how could we implement that without creating a chill on participation? Where's the sweet spot? So that's just what I wanted to put out there for trustees to discuss.
Reactions? what Carol shared? Well, I haven't spoken much, Carol, so I just thought, I think this is important topic. And I actually think the conflict of interest, amending that, it has to be part of a larger amendment to the village ethics code. And why that matters now, and I'll propose something for the January 20th meeting. I'll make sure it's in by next Tuesday, but really about strengthening trust, clarity, and consistency in how we govern them. And this is not about blame or punishment. It's about learning, improving processes, protecting the village going forward. The purpose would be to make sure that it aligns explicitly with Wisconsin statute, chapter 19, that it would incorporate a board of trustee code of conduct directly into our ethics code. It would certainly be in alignment with state law. I know you spoke to that. It would address the conflicts of interest. It would incorporate or address conduct at official meetings, including incorporating the civility pledge, which we already adopted as a body in resolution 2023-06, establishing consistent expectations for respectful dialogue, professional behavior, and constructive disagreement, and applying that equally to trustees, staff, and volunteers. The goal is productive governance, not limiting debate or dissent. With respect to treatment of staff, I think it will clarify an important boundary that while trustees set policy and direction, the village administrator manages the staff. It reinforces that professional courtesy and respect towards staff, protects staff from mixed signals and undue pressure, and supports a healthy, functioning workplace. There'd be some enforceability and accountability associated with that. And and what this is and what it's not. It's a governance improvement from one trustee, a transparency measure, a way to set clear expectations for current and future boards. It's not a reaction to any single person. It's not a tool to suppress disagreement. And it's not a substitute for open discussion or public input. I'll submit a draft and I'll invite trustee feedback, consider staff and legal review, allow time for refinement before adoption. Does it go to an ad hoc committee that we establish? Does it go to the personnel committee? I think that's something as a body we can determine. But a strong ethics code should reflect collective ownership, not majority rule alone. And ultimately, that amendment would help ensure integrity in decision-making, respectful working relationships, and confidence from residents. I think it'll strengthen the village, not any one role or viewpoint, and help us govern at our best. So I just wanted to share that kind of in reaction to Carol's kickoff. I see Shabnam's hand up.
I understood what Carol was talking about, more about the issue being enforceability. There's statutes, there's codes. You can have anything you want on paper. You could write whatever you want. The issue that we're trying to address is, how do you enforce it? How do you confirm it? About accountability.
Carol, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that's a very good question that Shabnam just put out there. And from the UW framework, what a university official is required to do is to have this information on file. And the framework kind of ends there. So once you have it on file, if there's a violation of conflict of interest, it is not super clear what happens after that. So I think that is a complete new frontier that we would be addressing there.
Mark?
Yeah, I guess I would like to know what the problem is. That is to say, what is it that trustees or residents are concerned about in terms of conflict of interest that are not covered by the state statute? Okay. What's the problem? Because I think unless we can identify what the problem is, we can't move really the discussion on. So I'm listening. I'm waiting to hear what the specific problem is. We can talk about down the road if we agree that that's a problem and how, if we do, how to remedy it. But it all starts with this is the specific problem. This is the thing that's troubling. Okay. And then to me, the second step in that process, after we decide, yes, it is a problem or it isn't, is the issue of, as you say, enforceability. Because I really have no interest in going down the civility pledge issue again, where we all agree that we're going to act in a certain manner. And then if someone chooses not to do that, we're left without a remedy. That's not satisfying to me. I don't think I want to do that. So first thing I want to know is what's the specific problem that we can legislate away in our ordinance? And then what if that conflict of interest does arise and violates our ordinance? What can we do about it? And without answers to those questions, I'm kind of stuck.
I just want to say as a citizen, it's very
Sure.
frustrating to me because I have written.
Mary, I'm sorry.
Gloria has written several letters. You should know if you've read our letters, which you have received,
Mary,
you should know what we.
I'm
perceive
sorry,
problems
this
to be.
discussion is now with the board. It's at the dais.
My
You know that.
apologies.
Thank you. We're going to keep the discussion on the dais. Other reactions, thoughts, comments to share with board members and the public? Lori, I'm sorry, we're having a discussion at this level right now.
So John, if I,
Yeah.
just a couple thoughts that I had.
Thank you.
On the policy, I assume, and these are just thoughts, I'm not asking for answers. Would it be, I assume, administered after someone is elected, then not someone running for office? And who maintains the records and if that's staff and there is a challenge on it, like what level does staff take to investigate that potential conflict of interest? Again, not things that need to be answered tonight, just things that popped into my head.
Well, just taking cues from what happens in the state and federal level, I think when you are a candidate running for office, you should disclose if you have conflicts of interest. When I ran for state assembly, I filled out a lot more forms and I got to see the other candidates' forms as well. And we should hold ourselves to the same high level bar of it's other people's money. You are a trustee entrusted with other people's money. And I think that should have a rigorous, robust process. We are at such a low point of trust in this municipality and nationwide. Every measure you take to restore that trust is the proper thing to do. And
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just in response to what you said, Shabnam, I mean, my concern, and I think Carol raised it as well, is yes, we could ask for all this disclosure, but there is a downside to that, and that is it might discourage participation, right, in the process. That people who otherwise would be fantastic civil servants and serve the best interest of the village just might not want to disclose their whole life, their whole financial situation, and so on. So I don't think this is a situation where more disclosure is always better than less disclosure. I think the disclosure, if we go that route, it needs to be targeted and balanced in the sense that we really think it's in the best interest of the village and at the same time promotes civic engagement, which would otherwise not do. Because I think we've seen at the national level and state level, many individuals who are quite qualified to serve don't step forward because they do not want to put themselves in the position of having to disclose their whole life. So I just think it's something we want to be measured about.
John nominated Bob.
I mean, I think at a bare minimum, you should meet the same requirements as the state. If being free of conflict of interest or having some exposure prevents you from running, don't run.
Bob?
Well, I guess I'd follow up on what Mark said. I think that we don't want to chill the waters here. I think we have to assume people are going to be trustworthy. People are going to be honest. They're going to serve in the best interest of the village until they don't. And otherwise, you presume they're guilty and have to, like Mark said, go and, comb through their underwear drawer. This is, to me, not a way to encourage civic participation. I think you want to assume people are going to be honest and go with that unless you have a reason that evidence that suggests otherwise. And then you go down that path when you need to. That's my feeling on that.
Thank you, Bob. Other discussion from board members?
This is coming up for a reason.
Well, Mark is next, but
Sorry, go ahead.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just make clear, we're already bound, right? We're bound by state statute. It's not like it's that there's no constraint on us as trustees. We are already constrained. So that's why my question would be, what additional constraints are other trustees or residents looking for? And I'm very open to considering them, but I need them enumerated in order to evaluate them and to balance the interest in public disclosure with also the interest in encouraging civic engagement.
Thanks, Mark.
Question for Carol Dietmar. How does the city of Madison do it for city council positions? Or do people disclose conflict of interest when they run for election for city council in Madison? Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I would say we could just model after what they do and steal that process. I think my thing gets back to, I think disclosing a level, like if you, for example, have a big funder for your personal business, right? Maybe that should be disclosed so that people know that that's a big funder. And if there was a similar name that showed up in village financials, that would be a conflict of interest. So I think I would be in favor of some level of disclosure, not extensive, but high level, maybe modeled after what Madison does or another city that we find is a good benchmark. And that when you do run, you disclose that and then it's on file. I still think it gets back to, so what happens when, is that brought up then when there's a discussion, and someone has to, recuse themselves from that conversation or not vote on a certain issue? I think that's where I'm unclear of how that gets actually implemented. So.
My recollection with the city is it's a financial disclosure. I've served on committees, and so you have to disclose where your 401ks are and stocks that you're involved in. But it's certainly be something to look at. I know our attorney's going to be with a couple minutes. Did you want to provide any thoughts on the conflict of interest, how municipalities handle that? And what office holders have to determine if they feel there's a conflict and disclose it? You just kind of speak to that.
Most communities, at least the ones that are of a size that hire an outside lawyer like me, do not have a local court event. So some certainly do. That's not the norm. I think that the norm is they rely on the state statute. I have had incidents over my career where they.
No one can hear.
You can't hear.
Yeah, I guess this is the problem when watching it online.
Can you hear me now? Awesome, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, most smaller communities just rely on the local code of ethics, the state statute. Some of them, the minority, have a local code. I was just gonna say, I've had a couple incidents in my career where a local code gets problematic in the sense that it is, if it's a local ordinance, a majority of the board can change it any way they want. And I've seen that be used, weaponized. And if a board is fractured, whoever happens to hold the majority can amend the code of ethics to weaponize it. So I caution against that. I'd echo sort of what one of the trustees said, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's why many don't use a local code. And then the last thing is what Brian had raised. I think if you do create these sort of reporting issues, give good thought to what enforcement mechanism you're going to use. Because in all frankness, you'd be putting the staff in a very difficult spot if there's an allegation that somebody either under-disclosed on their financial disclosure or didn't recuse themselves when they could. You don't want the staff member investigating the trustee. Most of those times, you end up hiring an outside investigator, which ends up incurring cost and all that sort of thing. So I would just caution you about that. That's about all. Everything else that's been said, yeah, I think is exactly right, and I've heard it many times. It's a policy call for the board. Do you want different rules above and beyond what the state already puts in place? The only last thing I guess I would add would be the financial disclosure requirements with respect to candidates. There is the state law on that. They have to comply with that. I would question whether this body would have the authority to impose those kind of requirements on a candidate. You can certainly make requirements of employees. You can certainly impose requirements on yourselves and committee officials, that sort of thing. A candidate is neither an employee or an official until they've been elected. So I would doubt you would have the authority to require them. Other than that, I can certainly answer any questions or try to.
No, that's good context. Any questions for Bill?
Yeah, one question for Bill. Try to think of a relevant hypothetical. Let's say Logic is my client. Let's say, I don't know, a restaurant in Trout Hills is my client, my day job client, and they want business from the village. What would what happens if I vote on it? What happens if I do? What is the proper thing that should happen? Where is the trouble?
Yeah, if it's a client of yours, then it hinges on, do you have a financial interest in the matter? So for instance, if you as the lawyer had it on a contingency basis where your pay would be influenced by the result of that, then that would be a violation of the code of ethics if you didn't recuse yourself and not participate at all. If on the other hand, you have no financial stake in it, oftentimes I get questions from trustees where they will be an employee of a company that is participating in some financial transaction with a village, and they ask, do I have to recuse myself? And the first question I ask them is, well, how is your pay calculated? And many times they are nothing more than a salaried W-2 employee. And if that's the case, my advice to them is it's always good you should disclose that, but you're not required to recuse yourself because you have no financial stake in that. You certainly can if you think if you can't be impartial. But if you're not financially benefited by the outcome, you would not have to recuse yourself. You or your immediate family, or an entity that you're associated with. So in your situation, whether you're personally benefited or your firm is benefited. That makes sense?
Sort of,
Yeah.
but like, what if, they say, I'm gonna contribute $5,000 to your cause. And they're a sponsor. And it's just, hey, I've got this business in front of the village. Wink, wink, I could contribute.
Well, the state code of ethics does also, there's the financial interest side of it I just talked about, but there is also the prohibition on using your power as a trustee for the benefit of somebody else, not in the best interests of the village. So you could not, in your scenario, do a quid pro quo of, don't give me the money, give the money to the Red Cross or something. That would still be a violation because you're trading your vote for the benefit of somebody else.
I think that's what we want to figure out is how do you make sure that people they don't have a quid pro quo?
Yeah, one way to view it is you certainly can create your system, but keep in mind that penalties are pretty draconian. In addition to the state code of ethics, there's also a state criminal statute that makes it a strict liability felony to negotiate, vote on, participate in the forming of a contract, a public contract that you have any benefit in. And it's strict liability. So even if you say, I didn't know it was illegal, you're guilty. It's a felony. So, on the one hand, I certainly hear what you're saying. You want to proactively get a hold of that. On the other hand, as was sort of said, you want to come at it with the idea that most people are going to behave properly. And if they're not going to behave properly, they're taking a real big risk if they get caught.
Okay, I'm not going to take up more of your time, but I am going to say that I think what Bill said should be written down and reminded to the board that what you're saying is strict liability. It's not even whether I knew or not, but the severity of such a thing is so high. And I don't know if everybody on the board knows that.
I'd be happy to email the statute and everybody can read it yourself because I think they probably would be good to see it. It's a scary statute, to be frank.
Thanks for that, Bill. Okay. All right, Gloria, can I ask you to submit your comment or question to the board directly?
Are we saying goodbye to Bill?
I know he has to leave at 6.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I've got 5 or 10 minutes if somebody has something else to add.
Okay. Gloria, that was my question.
Thank you.
Can you share your comment or question in writing with the board? I mean, like separately, like, just send an email or, okay, that'd be good. All right.
Can I use my time to ask Gloria to spend 10 seconds saying what you sound extremely desperate to say, because that hand's been up for a long time.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, as a board member, I'm against that. I think this is board time. We talk, we had public comments. If we need more public comments time, we should write that into the agenda.
We could also figure out how to do this moving forward, because we call on Tom Deegan all the time when we want his opinion, and I would like Gloria's opinion.
I agree. And I have lost circulation in my left arm. I don't know how long it's been up. It's been a little bit of a silent protest.
1 minute, Gloria.
But I will say that the reason my hand shot up is because of Mary Wyman wanting to respond to Mark. And so Mark, since Mary interjected, has repeated several times that he would like to see specifics. And I believe Mary's point is that there have been so many emails sent to this board regarding the conflict of interest policies and some of the problems that are seen by residents. And I think, I don't know, but I think that Mary's response is probably out of just bafflement that how Mark, given all these emails delineating some of the problems, how do you still not have any idea what the issue is? So that's all I wanted to say. But I can email that too.
Yeah.
But I've already emailed it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Okay, Carol, this has been a good discussion on in terms of conflict of interest. Is there other things you wanted to share or other things you'd like the board to discuss with respect to this part of the agenda item?
Is dropped from the call.
Exactly.
I will ask, I hope you'll ask Dietmar the same question. For me, I guess the decision point is whether we're going to pursue more development of a conflict of interest policy and who's going to be doing it. It sounds like this might be wrapped up in the agenda item that you're bringing for the regular January meeting, John. So, so I will look into the City of Madison policy just in case that becomes relevant. And yeah, that's all I have to say right now. Thanks.
Thanks. So are we ready to move on then to agenda item 8?
Last comment.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say one more thing about conflict of interest. When the individual is voting in the opposite direction, I think that it's clear that there's no conflict.
No.
All right, to be continued discussion. Never mind.
All right, we're moving on then to item 8, discussion of open records request workflow.
Carol, do you want to tee that one up as well?
Sure, I'll be glad to. And my teeing up is going to be pretty brief. We included the guidebook from the Attorney General's office on open records requests and responses to open records requests, just to get some more facts out there about how complicated it is and how time consuming it is to fulfill open records requests. I talked to Chrissy recently. Chrissy is the new clerk now, of course, and she's the one responsible for open records requests. And just learned that the majority of open records requests that were made in 2025 have been fulfilled. So there were on the order of 70 or 80, something in that realm, open records requests. And to be in the public comment period at a lot of recent meetings, you would suspect that, not very many had been fulfilled, but actually it's well over half, getting up into the 60s that actually have been fulfilled. So I just wanted to put that out there. The staff are working on this. They're doing their utmost to fulfill the requests and in the legal way. So part of the reason that we put this on the agenda is to figure out if the village can get help fulfilling open records requests. And this means just person hours because our staff are very, very busy. As we've talked about many times lately, we've just been through a lot in the village, a lot of the budget season, CIP, all the late meetings, all the stuff going on with staff shortages and now with new staff, which have to be trained, which for a while is about as difficult as having a staff shortage. So now question is, do we need more person hours? Can we buy those person hours? What kind of entity can help us fulfill open records requests? There are some law firms in Wisconsin that do this. One's called the Wisconsin Transparency Project, and another one is called Strang, which is in Middleton. Now, it seems like it might be quite expensive to have attorneys fulfilling open records requests, and there are also some logistic problems, like which kinds of records can be shared. How do we sift through personnel records and stuff like that are difficult to share with an outside entity as part of fulfilling the open records request? So wanted to open the discussion of what kind of money would we use to pay for this? Is it even a good idea? Could we use fund balance? Would we have to charge requesters more for requests that were fulfilled by an outside entity? So this is a part of what I wanted to talk about. And then the other part has already been alluded to several times tonight, which is records handling, records coming into the village. You know, we had this Dropbox for the records that were involved in the logic deliberations, a Dropbox that was created by the seller's agent. So was that a sufficient way to handle those documents? Should they have been handled by the village? Should they have been assessed at the very beginning as to the retention needs for those documents and the sharing needs? Obviously, you can tell the way I'm thinking, yeah, that data should have been handled differently. This is a very complicated ecosystem of proper document handling. We're not going to solve this tonight, although I was very interested to hear Craig Weinhold's comment about archiving village emails. So there's a ton to sift through here, but again, want to kick off the conversation. What's possible and what do we want to do?
And the only thing that I may want to add here is it's also forward-looking. You know, at what point in time does Brian have the confidence to bring this forward with a way of churning through all these open record requests? I think, Carol, you probably synthesized it best, that it's really an effort of just person power, of sorting through it, et cetera. That's what it amounts to, in addition to all the other obligations and duties. Now, my hope is that in any future point in time, that there aren't as many open records requests, but I also understand their purpose, right? That this is a way for people to get information, and that's how you have a very transparent government. But there needs to be, perhaps for this board to solve, perhaps for future boards to solve, to just give you also empower you to say, hey, white flag, here are options A, B, and C, but we need to fulfill these in a more timely manner. So that's, again, from my perspective, more forward-looking, very complex. I get all of this, but to start the conversation.
Hey.
Oh, so I think, just to back it up even further, so Shabnam and I were trying to get this on the December agenda. Actually, a conversation around open records. That was denied. I was hoping we could have this conversation in January because I feel that we need to rewind even further to what is the open records process for Shorewood. A resident has shared with me what the Dane County process is. It's very thorough. I think it's a great example. And so I do think, number one, we need to have a process that we know that our team and staff follow and that we've all agreed to. So I think that's thing number one. I think number two, when there is a volume that reaches a fever pitch, I think then we could probably, Carol, have that conversation around what do we go to? What's the contingency plan? If we're looking at 60 fulfilled of 70 or 80, I don't see this as an issue currently. So I don't think discussing whether we should throw money at this problem or not right now, it seems like the problem is kind of, there's no problem right now, if that's correct. If we only have 10 open records requests pending, then this shouldn't be an issue. And I do think that in terms of empowerment, I think this is where Brian is empowered to manage his staff correctly and say, you can only dedicate 10 hours a week towards open records. If this exceeds that, then that's the white flag. I go to the board, but I don't need to micromanage Brian, how you want to manage your team. You need to decide that and let us know when, and inform the board when, hey, we've got a real crisis issue here because of X, Y, and Z. So I don't see a crisis issue with these numbers right now. I think we need to rewind further to what is the actual process and align on that as a board, as a body, and then move on from there. So that's how I would want to handle open records.
Thanks, Kate. Shabnam? Oh,
Yeah.
Shabnam and then Carol.
So my understanding of the open records process is, a resident will write an email and say, I want this record. And then the staff will send that to Computer Magic. And then Computer Magic said they are able to do most requests in less than an hour. At the most complicated one might take 4 hours. And then they send the information back to Village Hall. And there might be something about like money related. There's something there about that. But then the staff, the time consuming part is to go through the documents to make sure that there's nothing that's like confidential, somebody's social security is on it, some, an address, and they would just redact that. And that is a time consuming process. I think that the trustees can do that. If you're looking for manpower, Carol, you have 7 trustees who can, confirm that this email from Kate to Shabnam doesn't have a social security number on it. Here you go.
Carol?
I'm not going to address that suggestion. I don't think that is workable. I did want to respond to what Kate said, that when we put this open records item on the agenda and we're focused on trying to find a way to get more person power, I confess that I had no idea that the staff had come so far in fulfilling the open records request to be present at the public comment periods. You would think that this was just a dumpster fire, just a raging, just out of control problem. So, you learn something every day. On the other hand, I think Chrissy is still working weekends to get this done. And I don't think that's a sustainable situation. I think our staff have been just completely pedal to the metal for months and months. So, yes, open records requests are being fulfilled and completed, but it's still not an ideal situation. And I think the sooner we figure out a way to add manpower, even if it doesn't have to be applied right this second, would be a good thing to do, because we don't want our staff in this situation continually.
Thanks, Carol. Kate, I see your hand up.
Yeah, agreed. So I think this is where Brian should own his staff and come to us with a proposal. I don't think it's the board's place to brainstorm a solution for Brian. Brian should run his staff the way he wants to. And I think we should see a plan from him to say, if there is a new fever pitch in the spring that we get to, this is how I'd like to handle it. Board, do you agree? Because I think we can go round and round here as the board, but I really think, Brian manages his staff, he can decide, and we should see a plan from him.
Chandra?
I would really like to know from every trustee what is wrong with trustees having the ability to review records. What is so terrible about public records being reviewed by the public officials? To redact a social security number, what's the threat of that? What are we so scared of?
I don't think, I'm not scared of that. I could sit there and do it. I think this is a perfect example of, I would love our trustees to be forward-looking and think about this as an opportunity. Is there an AI solution that, could staff run these papers through AI to redact email addresses? That exists. I think we need to start to get really savvy from a tech perspective on leveraging those tools. For me personally, I'm sorry, I don't have extra time in the week to sit and redact email addresses.
Sure.
I'm giving my time
Sure.
to the board in this manner. I'm not going to do clerical work, no offense, but that's just not why I ran for this seat. But I do think that there are tools out there. Sounds like Craig might have some great ideas. And I think there's other online tools that we can use to accelerate this. Literally, these things are flying off the shelves like now. And so we need to be like, one idea I have in terms of when we can ever get to, future looking work that is fun is to look at, well, how can we leverage and enable tech to get our jobs done faster and more efficiently? So that is a future agenda item, but.
Sean?
First of all, the issue of there's only 10 left. If open records requests are not fulfilled timely in 10 days or less, it's justice denied. Justice delayed is justice denied. 50 open records being pending since September and all of them being fulfilled in December, who cares? It was mostly about logic and the decision was done. That's a problem. And number 2 point, I will say it as I want to say it. I do not trust the open records process. I do not trust it. I do not believe that the system is designed that you would get a complete fulfilled open record. Let's just say I have emails. Let's just say I'm the person responsible for open records. It's my job to hand out emails and say, I don't want you to see something I wrote. You're asking me to be put in a position where I might want to delete something. And when you have a system like that, it's a problem. It's a problem.
So I would like to suggest that we have a further conversation at maybe in January, if the timing allotment allows for that agenda. I would like to resubmit that the Dane County example be placed in there as the process, because like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I do think aligning on a secure process is the right first step in regards to open records. I think if we align on the process to address these types of concerns that you have, and make sure it's fair for the staff, and something we all feel good about, then I would like us to test that process and put it into place in the new year.
Here's an idea I want to add to it. If Computer Magic does the search and they have the documents, they can also redact a social security number. And that email can go directly to the applicant. They're getting paid $120 an hour for a 5-minute search. They can spend an extra 5 minutes and do a thorough job and send it directly to the applicant.
All right, any other, Carol, anything else you were looking for this for agenda item? It's been a good discussion, a lot of good ideas.
Don,
Dietmar?
I want to acknowledge what you had said, and I'm fully behind that process. Of moving things forward in a very meaningful.
Thanks for that, Dietmar. All right, we're running out of agenda items for this meeting. So is there a motion for adjournment? Thank you, Bob. Was that your motion?
Yes, I'm sorry, John. I move
Appreciate
that we
that.
adjourn if we're done.
Appreciate that. Is there a second? Thank you, Kate. All those in favor? Great to see everyone. Happy New Year again, folks. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you on January 20th at 7 p.m.
I wanted to tell you something real quick.
Yeah.